Coming up afterwards, I'm going to be talking about the UK election and AI. And of course, I still want to hear from you, and I'll continue to take your calls on has the government forgot what matters to you? Scott basically thought they had. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. So, joining me now, Andrew Eborn. It says here I'm to describe you as a futurist.
Yes.
I mean, you're a lawyer, you're all sorts of things, aren't you?
All sorts of things. The Swiss Army knife of broadcasting, barrister, broadcaster and futurist. So
I love the idea of futurist. I once invited a futurist to a meeting, and I'll never do that again because it scared the what's the word?
But Jesus,
that's the word I'm looking for without the dump button.
Yes.
But look, what I wanted to explore with you here, and I'd love to hear from you if you've got a specific view on this. It's about the general fear that artificial intelligence, AI, is going to play a major role in elections, and particularly the UK election. So I'm asking people, have you been suckered in? Have you seen something on Twitter and think that is outrageous, should never happen, and then realise it's a fake, or maybe not realised it? And do you think it will influence voters? Andrew, I mean, let's get your take on that first.
Well, I'll tell you what, AI is our greatest human achievement, but also potentially the biggest existential threat. And it depends on what happens. There have been seismic changes in terms of medical discoveries, in terms of what's happened creatively. We had at the beginning of last year, in March last year, remember the Pope and a puffer, and that sort of fooled the world in a sort of amusing way.
Didn't fool me.
Well, there you go. So
I think they're awful things anyway, puffer jackets.
Oh, well, you don't like them. Well,
I couldn't see a man of taste.
Well, the devil wears Prada, but Pope prefers puffers. I worked on that sort of basis. But they also then started having these audio recordings coming out. You might remember the Drake and Weekend in April, and that fooled the music. Drake and the Weekend. The Weekend is wonderful rappers. You know,
no,
about
I've
rappers.
no idea what you're talking about.
Well,
here.
a lot of millions of people did though. So what they thought is, hang about, these two have collaborated for the first time.
Okay.
And it fooled the industry. And it got millions and millions and millions. The Weeknd and Drake are two wonderful artists. I'll play some stuff afterwards.
Obviously, I don't have a clue what he's talking about here, but millions will, yes.
Well, they will. And so what that also showed, though, is how that's working, not just on a visual side, but the audio side. You're now getting the combination of that, where you're getting these fake videos coming out. And what's happening, they are indistinguishable from the real thing. And we've got lots and lots of examples of those.
I think we're going to put some up on screen, I was told. There's going to be one of something, Rishi Sunak. He was pulling pumps.
Yes, he went to a beer festival in August last year.
And he's a non-drinker, isn't he?
He's a non-drinker, so he's teetotal, so that's the first bit of fake news. Yeah. But the other thing, I've probably got the image, it was an appalling pint, is what it was, because it had an enormous head.
Oh, so it was a bad pint.
And it looked like a bad pint. There we go, we've got the image there. We've got both images. So the one on the right-hand side shows the very bad pint, was the one. You've got the person looking askance thinking, what on earth are you doing? What the most inappropriate pint ever. And the real one shows him pulling a perfectly fine pint and the person looking directly ahead. What that did, and it was shared by a Labour MP to say, Lou, you can't pull pints, they wouldn't have a pint like that. How can he run the country? How can he run the country? And that was the whole idea. So it's an example of fake news and the need to absolutely question everything.
I'm going to put this out there because we've had lots of calls on lots of subjects today, but this one I would love to know if there's anyone out there, and you can be anonymous, if you were suckered and thought it was in, because we're all taken in. I wasn't taken in by the puffer jacket, but or more importantly, how do you think we should think now when you see something controversial? That's the question, is it? Should we doubt everything?
Oh, absolutely. And I advocate around the world, you must question everything. We're living in a very diseased information age where we're polluted with all sorts of misinformation and disinformation and working on that sort of basis. And
that makes us very cynical then.
Well, no, but you have to be cynical because the National Cyber Security Centre, they warned that this is the first time we've got, 40 elections in 40 plus countries around the world, about 40% of the whole population goes to the polls.
It's 2 billion people voting,
absolutely.
Something huge. And I think it's 60 elections, by the way.
Amazing. And Slovakia is a good example. So
what happened there?
What happened there? The parties were neck and neck, and a pro-Kremlin party in the end won, because 48 hours before the polls closed, a recording suddenly emerged, sounds familiar, a recording emerged of this particular politician, basically saying how they were going to rig the election, how they're going to buy votes and so on and so forth.
And it sounded like them?
And it sounded totally like them. It's going back to my point about The Weeknd, your favourite band, and Drake.
Oh, they're a band?
Oh, well, not really, but the two of them together could be.
Sorry, I distracted you. Stick to the point.
Stick to the point. But the whole sort of point was exactly that. It sounded like them. And audio recordings are exactly that. So you might remember last year as well, we had the Education Secretary effing and blinding and so on and so forth, and that turned out to be real.
Yes.
And within a matter of weeks afterwards, we had a recording, apparently, of Keir Starmer.
Telling someone off.
Telling someone off.
Very brutal
and
fashion.
Effing and blinding in a way that would make the Education Secretary blush.
So before you hit the retweet button...
Yes.
You've basically got to think, because actually these things can get out and in no time at all. And that one did, I think.
Oh, they did. They always say that a lie travels halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on.
And also you want to believe it.
Oh, you do?
There will be people who will
They're delicious. No, absolutely. And what you're doing at the moment, I say we're drowning in a sea of information, most of which is false. What you're doing is you're looking for stories that support your prejudices.
But what can we do about this?
Well, there's a number of things. Well, there's a number of things, actually, because you can do certain things. To work out if a video or an image is fake, there's a number of tools already available. So we fact check everything. There are a number of sites. I do a regular series called Andrew Eborn's Fake or Fact, where we look at particular stories. But there are also certain tools. For example, on Google, you now have an image search, a reverse image search. And what that will do, you click on the image, you drag it, and try it this afternoon, drag it to the Google search button, and it will then show you where the image first appeared. So you'll get a date, you'll get the context, you can then work out, is it actually fake? So all of those sort of tools are really powerful.
I'm just talking about some of the abuse I've been receiving on my personal Twitter from idiots that are generally hidden by anonymity.
Yes, anonymity,
that's the word. And probably lazy.
Yes.
Right? So they don't care. They're not going to check the information.
Well, they should do, because actually what you want to do is make informed decisions. And the more...
Do they? Well, no, they just want to add to abuse
the more that we can call it out, which is why and what's happening. And the pressure being put on social media companies now is to say, look, take down some of these fake videos. There were lots of paid adverts, for example, Rishi Sunak promoting a dodgy scheme from Elon Musk. The scheme wasn't true, Rishi didn't do it,
well, I think,
and they borrowed a BBC...
money expert,
Martin
Lewis,
yes.
he had to put warnings out that his name was being used.
And you have a number of people, you have fake dental plans being done, lots of people being used in the public eye. So it's not just the Pope and the Puffer, but lots of celebrities having their endorsement on that sort of side.
Absolutely.
Tom Hanks, for example, was used, there was a deep fake video of him doing a dental plan. But interestingly, you can work on the licensing. AI was right and centre, front and centre of the Hollywood strike, both from the writer's point of view and also the actors, because you can do one day's filming and you've got them for the rest of your life and you can put them in the movies, and that will be the future of entertainment. What they were saying is that we need to have a proper recompense for that. So the poster boy for this is Bruce Willis, who sadly has aphasia, so he couldn't act anymore. What he did was license his name and image to a Russian telecom company for a particular campaign for millions, and they managed to do an AI version of Bruce Willis, and as a result he earned money even though he could no longer be
he embraced it.
Yeah, embrace it. Understand the technology and embrace it.
So, Nick Dubois, I'm running to be Prime Minister.
Yes.
Okay, and
I'd vote for you.
My campaign is going brilliantly well.
Yes.
And then an image goes out on social media. They're going to have kittens here.
Yes.
And it's of me with a woman who's 30 years younger than me.
Yes, impossible.
Doing all sorts of things I shouldn't have done. Absolutely unbelievable. And it's all true, but I deny it.
Yes.
I say this was fake news. I mean, would I get away with it?
Well, there are ways of searching, as I say, so you can do reverse image searches, you can put it in context. The reason you can tell about the fake audio is you listen for extraneous noise and so on and so forth. The Keir Starmer one, for example, there was nothing there. There was no two sides to the conversation. There weren't people who would verify that there was at a particular event and so on and so forth. And you have a number of those. There was another one with Sadiq Khan. You might remember the thing about Remembrance Day and the marches.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a fake recording that came out, apparently with Sadiq saying, well, let's postpone Remembrance Day. And all of a sudden, of course, that was going to get everybody, their blood vessels bursting. And what happened is, that was again fake. But you could tell that because there was no context. There was no people to support in that sort of way. So what I would always urge people to do is go and try and find verified sources. If a particular story sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
I suppose that's a very good guideline. Because AI has its positives. And I'll just tell you this is really really interesting.
Yes.
People think this is a cheap plug, but it is relevant, trust me. I wrote my first novel, it came out about 2 years ago, called Fatal Ambition.
Oh, I love it.
And I've been nagged, very kind of you to say so, and I've been nagged, am I going to do a follow-up? It's right for a follow-up. Do you know what? I haven't got round to it. And then I thought, I'm going to see what AI can do. And it's fascinating because my simple mind was, I thought, oh, do a PDF, upload it, and it'll rewrite the whole novel. Well, it won't do that as it happens. The AI I did, I basically cheated it into writing a few chapters. And it was extraordinary.
Absolutely.
And then when I put in a few facts and it came up with this chapter, and I thought, that's not bad. Then I get the choice of saying, write it in the style of Jeffrey Archer or whoever you want. I could not believe how powerful this was.
And it's getting better and better all the time.
I think I'll just wait.
I know, but do that. And that's what's going to happen. Producing a first draft on working on that sort of basis
and then
is
you work.
Really powerful.
I know, I've done 10,000 words.
Yeah. Isn't that incredible?
It is. Now, I'm deliberately fessing up here because I haven't actually made up my mind. I might actually use this and, as you say, use it as a draft.
Use it as a co-pilot is the best way. It's a phenomenal tool as a co-pilot. When you're staring at a blank page and you've got your copy deadline, it will give you your first draft and you can play with it. And it's not just writing, it's coming up with music, and artists are now embracing it.
Well, I'm wondering of saying, make a screenplay.
Yeah, they'll do it.
And see what I know. It's extraordinary.
It is quite extraordinary. One of the big issues, though, Nick, is obviously it's got to get its information from somewhere,
and it goes around the web,
and
doesn't
it scrapes. And so I'm an intellectual property lawyer, so we look at that side. What we need is a fair recompense, and there are a number of cases taking place around the world at the moment with these AI companies being sued. People like the New York Times are suing, and so on and so forth, and big authors are suing because they're using the information.
Well, they are. But what's really interesting is after about 5 or 6 chapters, it started to steal stuff from my first novel, which of course is on the web.
Yes.
And I thought, how interesting. Its brains worked out that there's these characters all there.
Right.
So yeah, I do find it quite fascinating that is coming up.
Absolutely. And it's learning all the time, Nick, and that's the idea. It's going to get better and better.
And it may help us. Listen, Andrew Eborn, thank you. Futurist, litigation, what are you?
I can sue. Intellectual property lawyer. I'll make people money.
AI expert. He's going to comment on my novel. There you go.
I love it.
You can, thank you very much for joining us. Now, thank you again.
This is Talk TV.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn and journalist and author Christina Patterson. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the headline of the Sunday Telegraph, UK ready to strike Houthis again, says Cameron. A report on the Foreign Secretary's piece in the paper about the threat the conflict is causing to freedom of navigation. The risk to the economy posed by the crisis in the Red Sea is what The Observer is leading with. Their headline, Red Sea crisis could shatter economic recovery hopes. 100 days of hell. The Mirror's top story looks into the Middle East's grim milestone with a story about a premature baby clinging to life in a Gaza hospital. The Sunday Express is reporting on calls from MP Kevin Hollenrake to jail the post office chiefs who were behind the scandal that convicted innocent postmasters of fraud. The Sunday Times reports Theresa May's government knew about concerns over the Horizon IT system, but still pushed through a CBE for post office boss Paula Venables. The Mail on Sunday is leading on an exclusive with more details about the man involved in a revolt on a British Airways flight in November, who they report avoided deportation despite previous gun and drug convictions. And The Sun on Sunday has an exclusive on Lauren Goodman's former relationship with footballer Kyle Walker. The cold weather is the top story on The Star. The headline, brace yourself for the big freeze. See what they did there? And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the program, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And as I said, we're joined tonight by Andrew Eborn and Christina Patterson. Always wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for coming. OK, let's start with a grim front page and a grim milestone as well. Let's go to the Sunday Mirror. And it says Middle East's grim milestone, 100 days of hell, because Sunday marks, of course, the 100 days of the conflict. And, you know, a picture there of a premature baby. And, of course, we have seen a huge loss of civilian, you know, whatever the politics one might take behind it, a huge loss of civilian life. Christina, what did you make of the coverage? What do you make of the milestone?
Well, the milestone, the whole thing is just tragic. It's tragic from start to finish. And one of the many tragic aspects of this is we don't know how this will finish. Obviously, more than 23,000 Palestinians have been killed in this. The hostages, many of them still haven't been returned. Some of them have died. There seems to be no way out for this. And we know what's happening with South Africa and accusations of genocide, and we don't know what will happen there. But what is absolutely clear is that this is just a tragedy, and it's a tragedy that will have global implications for a very long time to come, because whatever Israel does and doesn't manage to succeed in doing in relation to Hamas, what is absolutely clear is that it certainly will not have killed the desire to obliterate Israel, which, you know, unfortunately one assumes that generations of terrorists will be born from this tragedy. So in a way, there's almost nothing sensible to say about it. We just hope and pray that it will end.
Andrew?
Oh, and absolutely. And this is the problem. I think, in a way, we almost get desensitized to a lot of these things until you personify it by looking at this terrible tragedy. Power cuts, they're saying, about threatening the lives of the Gaza babies. This is the most, probably the youngest victim, they say, in one of the last working medical facilities as a result of it. It's a horrible, grim milestone. And as you say, there's no end in sight. And this is the real problem.
I mean, you say desensitized, but actually we saw thousands and thousands of people out on the streets of London, Global Day of Protest. We're seeing these protests everywhere. And, you know, often it has to be said in conflicts, sometimes the attention of the public outside wanes, but here it doesn't seem to. I mean, you're still seeing people turn out.
Yes, I think you're right, and I think in particular many young people have been are extremely passionate about this. I think one of the tragedies of the situation, though, is that, I mean, who wouldn't be enraged by what is going on? It is absolutely right to be horrified by what happens in a war. And, of course, questions certainly should be asked of Israel and are being asked about the strategy it's taking. And even David Cameron said at a select committee this week that he thought that Israel might well have committed war crimes. So, you know, it's completely understandable that people would be angry. But when people demonstrate about the situation there, what they don't say is what you are meant to do when an enemy embeds themselves among civilians and uses human shields.
I suppose that's why so many people are focusing on sort of some kind of plan for when the violence ends, which, you know, of course, hopefully will be soon. Now, let's go to the Telegraph, because, of course, one of the risks has always been, and one of the fears of the allies of Israel, is this escalating, becoming a regional conflict. So, front page of the Sunday Telegraph, UK ready to strike Houthis again, says Cameron. Andrew, what does he say exactly?
Well, basically saying they can defend their freedom of navigation, and the attacks on the Red Sea mean they have to go the very long way round to deliver, obviously, the oil and various other things as well, has a massive impact. And so this is, again, the language of war and the real concern about the escalation of that. And so that's what he's trying to do. He's sort of saying, well, there are people chanting on the streets, well, Yemen, make us proud. And it's the language of hate. And I think what's happened in the poison that there's been in social media is spilled out onto the streets. And we saw this, I think, within the 24 hours of October the 7th. And what was happening on that sort of situation is there were about 50 million posts on social media about the conflict. A lot of it, some of it artificially intelligent creation, a bit of fake news as well as the reality.
Yeah, Christina, before I go to you, let me just pull up the front page of The Observer. The Red Sea crisis could shatter economic recovery hopes. So, sorry, front page of The Observer, there it is. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on the Red Sea and you know, the freedom of navigation, because that could have impact. You know, obviously, this crisis is causing a lot of deaths, but there is an economic angle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm not sure that people have really grasped the potential implications of this economically. There's talk that it could affect cause our GDP to shrink by 0.3%. And I've heard this week, as I'm sure many of us have, interviews with people who run businesses whose costs for shipping have quadrupled, quintupled, just become totally unaffordable. It means that our bills will yet again go up.
So in light of that, do you think that we're going to see, I don't know, the UK government, the US government maybe put even more pressure? Because they are obviously putting pressure on Israel behind the scenes. Do you think?
Absolutely. Well, I don't think I'm afraid I don't think the UK is in much position to put pressure on Israel, but I think Biden and Blinken will continue to, and we can only hope that somehow or other there will be some kind of de-escalation at some point. But what's not clear is the Houthis are saying this is all about Gaza. I mean, that they are attacking ships that are nothing to do with Israel or countries that support Israel. So I don't think their message is entirely coherent.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very complex region and everyone has lots of reasons, but certainly that what's happening in the Palestinian territories in Gaza is, I mean, certainly the Middle East is glued to the images that we're seeing come out of Gaza. So it is an incendiary situation, to say the least. Let's look at some domestic news now. Front page of the Times. So this is about that CBE that was given to the head of the post office. So Venel's given CBE despite Horizon fears. Honours Committee under May government ignored the warnings and pushed through with the award straight away.
It's one of the biggest scandals and miscarriages of justice. And I was with Michael Rodkin just a few hours ago. He was the sub-postmaster who was invited in to look at Horizon system and discovered all sorts of things where they could alter the figures and so on and so forth. But it's shocking news. And every time that we're unveiling more and more about what actually happened. So what they're saying here is the Honours Committee under May government ignored the warnings that the system was defective and still pushed through the CBE for Venels. And I think the general public, they're outraged about it. What's interesting, though, it took an ITV drama before that really came to light. And people have been dripping the story for a number of years on that sort of basis.
In fairness, I'll say this, that a lot of journalists did work on it. It sort of never captured the public imagination because obviously the drama was built from the journalism. Christina, again, before I come to you, let's look at the Sunday Express, which has a different angle on the same story. So, Minister, jail post office bullies. I mean, again, from no action for so long now, there's a lot of calls for action.
Well, that's right. There is. Everybody, as Andrew says, following the drama, everybody wants to be shown to be the person who was right while everybody else was wrong. And an awful lot of people were wrong. But I do think what's interesting about this, Kevin Hollingrake is the Post Office Minister, and he's saying that some of the corporate people should go to jail. And certainly from what we know, it looks as if some of them should go to jail. I mean, obviously, there would have to be court cases, but I think there should be prosecutions. But what was interesting to me about the Sunday Times story about the pushing ahead under the May government of the CBE for Paula Venels is that actually it looks as if the politicians were actively encouraging both Her Honour and the Post Office to override objections about the Horizon system. So, in fact, it's worse than we think, because in that story, somebody who is not named essentially suggests that Paula Venel was rewarded for going against her conscience because the government wanted to cut costs and they wanted the Post Office to keep costs low, i.e. not allow all these expensive claims to go ahead. So that is a pretty explosive allegation. And I do think politicians were not just complicit, but more malign than that.
OK. I'll have to leave it there for now. Christina, Andrew, stay with us. We'll have more from the front pages, including this in the Sunday Times. Their headline, Beijing doesn't scare us, says the new leader of Taiwan. Stay with us. Watching the press preview with me now are barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn and journalist and author Christina Patterson. Thanks for being with us. OK, let's go to the front page of the Sunday Times. This time, let's focus on one of their main stories. Zelensky's plea to the West, help us now, for the sake of all of our futures. And this is, of course, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, I guess in a way reminding the West that there's a war still going on, that he is fighting. And I suppose he's a bit scared about election year, especially in the US. Christina, what did you make of what was said here?
Well, and it's another tragic situation, I'm afraid to say. I mean, Rishi Sunak has just been out there and given 2.5 billion to contribute to Zelensky's war effort. I don't think any of us would begrudge that, but it is strange how he can find money for war when he tells us there is no money for so many other things. But this is a fight against tyranny, really, because obviously Putin has invaded another country, and it is desperately bad luck for Zelensky that the Gaza situation has exploded in the way it has, because the eyes of the world are now on that rather than on Ukraine. And of course, the situation, as you said or suggested, in the US is pretty awful. Biden did not get the funding he wanted to give to Ukraine, which is enormously hindering Ukraine. And Ukraine will not win this war. I mean, it's a proxy war. It is sending its own people. It will not win it if it doesn't get the financial help from the West and the weapons. The Ukrainians are being incredibly brave, and many are dying and being injured and wounded and losing homes and livelihoods and so much else in the course of this war. But without Western support, it won't win.
And that's the real problem, isn't it? Because what does victory look like? He's talking about you've got to keep on going, keep on throwing more and more money at it. And as you rightly say, where is this 2.5 billion coming from? And I know they all sort of said they're going to be there till the very end, and they've all signed the flag. I think all the cabinet signed the flag as a sort of an interesting gesture. But when they're talking about victory, it's incredibly difficult to look at that in reality.
Sure, but I suppose it could be victory as in the West standing together behind Ukraine and sending that message to Putin. I mean, you know, maybe some Ukrainian territory will eventually just become Russian, depending on how much. But I guess that would be victory, certainly for Zelensky, but potentially for the European.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that's what we need to look at, is what does a victory look like? Because winning the war, I think, is an ambition which I think is probably too difficult to achieve. I think trying to get people to the negotiating table to say, OK, let's work out how we stop this would be a more realistic approach.
Yeah. OK, let's go again to another domestic story, which is the Express, page 2. Pupils can't learn to read on screen. Thousands of children would be left unable to write and spell if schools do not cut down on routine screen use in lessons. Christina, what do you think of this?
Yeah, well, this doesn't seem to be an incredibly explosively new finding. An education expert who's presumably sent a press release to the Sunday Express is being quoted for her views on pupils using screens and how that might hinder their literacy and exam skills. And I think there is nobody on this planet who would deny that that might be the case. But, you know, on the other hand, what you gain in terms of incredible skills for young, you know, very small children on, you know, maybe they won't use handwriting in the way that we did. Skills change over time. I
confess my handwriting is terrible.
Mine is as well. Mine is terrible.
I only notice when I'm writing Christmas cards.
I know, exactly.
And it's true, use it or lose it is what they say.
Wow.
And you work on that basis. And I think the problem is if you're doing things on screen, and they've also announced that next year they're going to start doing GCSEs on screen, so you won't necessarily need to do that for certain pupils and so on and so forth. But if you have instant spelling checks and so on and so forth, you're going to have issues there.
I have to say, though, my little boy uses a screen for spelling, and actually that's quite useful because it gives him, you know, it tells him if it's the wrong answer. So, but yes, certainly for writing, it hasn't helped any of us, has it?
Oracy, I think, is the skill that they're going to bring in for people. And because with AI basically enabling people to do first drafts of virtually anything, the way to really test people is to say, OK, stand up in front of the class and talk to us about it.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
How's your son on that front?
He's very little.
Very little.
It's only 7, so I think, you know, we have time. Let's go to the Mail on the Sunday, front page. And the beautiful picture of the Queen and, well, then Prince Charles, but obviously King Charles now. A royal exclusive secret summits over making Charles regent in Queen's last years. And it's about these revelations from this book that, you know, some revelations have come out already, especially about the Queen's final moments, which we're told peaceful.
Well, I was very pleased. I mean, you know, death is no picnic. And, you know, many of us have lost family members in situations that have not been entirely peaceful. So I'm very pleased to hear that the Queen died peacefully in her sleep. Yeah. And it's very touching also to hear that she was doing her red boxes really right up to when she died. She was an incredibly diligent person.
Andrew, we've got 30 seconds, but I know you've got stuff to say.
Well, I think the poor old Charles saying that he was out picking mushrooms, what a fun guy, I think you work on that sort of basis. I feel a bit sad for him that was the revelation, because he was at his mother's side right to the end. I think it felt a bit intrusive from my point of view.
True, I can see that. Andrew, Christina, for now, thank you both.